Hey, it's Sam, making this quick video here on Monday, March 30th, 2015. A lot of interesting things happening in the sky right now. In particular, we have a very close Sun-Ketu conjunction. We just had the Sun eclipsed, so the fact that Sun and Ketu are exact today here on March 30th is important because there's probably been some big shifts, or there should have been some big shifts that have happened since the last eclipse, or since the last month or so, when we started to enter this eclipse portal that probably revolve around the sign of Pisces and whatever house that is for you. And so you're really feeling, I guess, the clarity or the implications, or you should be really feeling the different identity, spiritual identity, as a result, because this is what the Sun is. The Sun is our true identity beyond this personality. And most people don't really understand even what that true identity beyond the personality is. It's not like you, that real you, who is an artist and who has these ideas and who is expressing that. That's not the Sun, okay? That's seen by the ascendant, the rising sign, the ascendant Lord. Your incarnation in this lifetime as an individual is shown by the ascendant, and the things that affect your ruling planet and all of those things determine how much you're able to express yourself as a unique being. What the modern writer Mark Gaffney calls your unique self is shown by the ascendant, and it's folding in those qualities of the universal self. I'm talking about universal self, which is the Sun, the Paramatman, the Supreme Self, the part of you that is the same as the part of me. When we say namaste, we're saying the light in me recognizes that same light in you is the same. We are the same light. So namaste is a very complex thing in that sense. The light in you and the light in me is the same light, and I recognize that. And it's not a personal thing. It's not the personality light. It's not the light of the personality. It's the light of pure being. That's what the Sun is. And the Sun burns off and purifies the lower forms of the personality and the ego, which is not the unique self that I just talked about. Those two things are really not in conflict, naturally. Those things of the ego and the personality, and that seeing our true self through some kind of reflection and some kind of shadow, actually has to do with the third house, and also experience of the Sun in detriment. So eclipses bring this out. Eclipses bring out our power struggles because we don't know who we are, and we think our power comes from some limited worldly equation, and it doesn't. And so the power struggles we have as we're trying to find our own light and trying to feel our own light, which emanates from within outwardly, really gets blown up in eclipses. And this is why there's often power struggles with others, either in romantic relationships or other kind of relationships during eclipses, because we think our power comes from others and the reflection that they give back to us. And again, eclipses are polarizing events where they come together around the solar eclipse, but then there's a lunar eclipse 30 days later that brings out the contrast. It's the interplay between the Sun and the Moon, which show polarity and duality, and the Earth, which is you in the middle of it. The Earth is your body and your incarnation in the midst of this universal supreme self, the Sun, and this incarnating being, the Jiva. So the Moon is the Jiva Atman, which is the mind that keeps incarnating through lifetimes and carries all of your karmas with it. But the Sun is the part of you that has never incarnated and will never incarnate, that's joined everything. So the Sun gets eclipsed, and because we think we're this extinguishable being rather than this inextinguishable light, we get into power struggles, usually with other people, because that's who we're struggling with, and their reflection that comes back. And it's in the Jiva level that we're in this power struggle. And the Sun and the Moon, again, in the highest sense, there's nothing blocking the light, there's nothing blocking the reflection. the waxing and waning of the moon is part of duality here in form, so that we can incarnate with a body. But the universal moon is not the waxing and waning of the emotions. It's the purity of love at the center of everything. That's the pure moon beyond the waxing and the waning. How it feels to be that universal being is the moon. The universal being, the Paramatman, the Supreme Self, is the sun. The one without a second, the inextinguishable light, the one that's joined to all others. That's the sun. And how that feels to be this being of love, well, what it feels like is pure love with no opposite. My Guru Amma says, love has no opposite. Love isn't a feeling, it's a flow. When the love we experience is an emotion, but that's not love. That's, joy and excitement and passion, and then depression, sadness. That's not love. So the pure love is the purity of the moon in the heart, and the pure power is the purity of the sun. But we experience them in great contrast when we have eclipses. It polarizes some factor in us. So here on March 30th, with the sun joined Ketu, it's a great opportunity to feel that inextinguishable light within. Notice the counterfeit version that we were grappling with during the eclipse, where we mistook our light to be something external. And notice that. And Ketu is the end of the node that has to do with pure mastery and nothing of this world. Rahu is the end of the node where we're trying to accelerate a new cycle, and we're trying to learn something very quickly, where we don't have a lot of experience, where we can feel like we need to just try something and we're not really sure what it is. Ketu is where we feel like I've tried everything already and I can't try anymore. I need to just kind of, it's quite a rejecting sort of attitude where we feel used up in a certain way. And again, when it joins the sun, it makes for a lot of perfectionism. When it joins anything, it makes for perfectionism, especially around the self. So it's a great opportunity now for you, as the sun goes over Ketu this week, and we have the culmination of the eclipse, when we have the lunar eclipse later in the week. It's a great chance for you to reconcile this opposition and to really understand the pure light within you and gain mastery of that, especially as it relates to Pisces themes and whatever house that's in. So we'll experience that lunar eclipse here in the West on April 3rd, which is a time when the moon will then join Rahu, which is at the other end of the node, and try to sort of gather the pieces, which is in Virgo, kind of the emotional pieces that the eclipse in Pisces maybe has blown open, and that portal that opened. I'll talk more about that lunar eclipse as we get closer to it, but that's obviously very important, and it's a very important harmonizing point of the solar eclipse that we just had. So Ketu Sun this week is big for really connecting with the true self. Now, we had Venus go into Aries a couple weeks ago. I think it was like March 13th or March 12th, 11th, 12th. And Venus going into Aries also really set up an opposition. When you get planets in signs opposite that they rule, it's quite polarizing. And in particular around relationship themes, it's important to talk about this, especially since Mars also joined Venus again last week. So Venus in Aries, really set up this kind of opposition and a kind of snapping back against Venus energy, and particularly against Libra energy, because Venus rules Libra, then it's in Aries, the opposite sign. This is, typically you'll see this kind of insistence on respect, or the opposite, like the shadow side of Libra is the best way to put it. That conscious Libra energy is when we have a very firm grasp of our values first, and then the other person's values and their value system, and where we understand how to negotiate and how to compromise and how to at least do our best to see that everyone's needs get met, and we have a good balance between, you know, what we can compromise on faithfully, in good faith, and what we can't. Now, again, when Libra energy is dark and when things interrupt it for whatever reason, there's a lot of reasons. Any planets that interrupt Libra and or Venus energy can show a sort of distortion in that field, where either we don't compromise very much at all, or we compromise too much, or we do it because we're, you know, fearful or hopeful or whatever it is. Then often when Venus goes into the opposite sign, in particular Aries, there's a strong snapping back against that. And a few things to understand about this, you know, again, relationships and Venus energy are what teach us compromise, because relationship brings us into a situation where, first of all, there's that pleasure that we want to fulfill with the other person. And again, the planets as karakas hook us on a very deep level. If there wasn't that promise of, you know, sexual pleasure and romance and that smiling person who makes us feel happy and all that thing that we get from it, from, like, let's say a romantic relationship, because that's the culmination of that area of life. If there wasn't that, like, the highest pleasure we can get, then we wouldn't go into that most difficult area. They have to be even. You know, God knows what He's doing. No question. To go into that most difficult, transformative area of life, we need to have the most pleasurable, beautiful experience we can imagine. If it wasn't, we wouldn't go into that area of life. So sex and beauty and the promise of pleasure and that whole thing is the hook that keeps us going back into that thing again and again, to like face these parts of ourself that need more tolerance or whatever it is that we're trying to work through in a relationship. And we have to understand that we do it for our own benefit. And again, this is where a lot of things get really screwed up with Venus, because Venus is where we're trying to compromise, and it is where we extend ourselves beyond what we normally would do. But we're extending ourselves beyond what we would normally do, first of all, because we get something from it. And just very simply, most of the time what we get is harmony and peace and happiness. And the easiest way to be happy right now in the moment is to compromise with someone else. The easiest way to be happy right now is to just give in. It's easy. You don't want to fight? Just say okay. Just agree. Some people do it too much. They agree to things they shouldn't agree to, and they make others think that they're okay with it. They establish agreements that they're not in alignment with. And in the mind, one of the biggest problems with Venus is they think to themselves, oh, here I am tolerating all of your mistakes. Here I am tolerating all of your anger and all of the things that I don't like. Here I am tolerating it. Like this martyr complex sets in. And this martyr complex of, well, all I've done for you, all the compromising I've been doing for you, that snaps back often in Aries, where now I'm not compromising at all. I've been doing this the whole time, and this whole kind of like dictator thing comes back, snaps back to try to like balance the scale, to use the very overused Libra metaphor. And the thing to realize is all of that compromising and all of that love and all of that, okay, I'm being nice, see, that you think the person is okay with or whatever is going on, all of that was for your benefit, was for the person's benefit, because they wanted connection. So let's say that's something that you've been doing, like you've been compromising too much, and in your mind you're like, God, I've just been tolerating, he's such a, or she's such a grouch, and she's such a this and that, and I've been trying to tolerate it, and now I'm not doing it anymore. And this righteous indignation we get, all of that's garbage. You're compromising because of what you got from it, which was connection. Because you wanted connection. There's no gun to your head to make you compromise. And the reason you didn't establish your values and your principles, and the reason you sold your principles down the drain, is because in the moment, connection was more important than your principles. And so then, again, Venus goes into Aries, and suddenly our principles become more important. Especially after Mars then joins it. Then suddenly everything is about our principles, because Venus, that capacity gets really darkened. We're not interested in making nice. Now it's in Aries, which is about our individuality and how aligned we are with our principles. So this is why, in particular, like Venus in Aries it's like the shadow of Libra. It's like the shadow side of the opposite. Anytime this happens, we have another version of that right now with Mercury in Pisces. It's like the shadow side of Virgo. So all of these things that have been, where you've been nitpicky beyond belief, with Mercury and Pisces, it's kind of like all those things kind of flounder around. So all the shadow talk that's discussed now in modern astrology and whatnot because of Jung and all that, this is really how you want to see how the shadow plays out in astrology. This is the biggest way. A couple. One of them is eclipses. Another one is when you get planets, it's called in your fall in Western astrology, but this opposite sign from a sign it rules. Now, again, like when Venus is in Scorpio, it's showing the shadow side of Taurus, which is about comfort, stability, sensual pleasure and comfort and structure. And Scorpio is the shadow side of that, like kind of destroying that. So again, when people have this in their natal chart, they kind of run this shadow a lot. But regardless, if your Venus is not there, or let's say you have a powerful Venus, you're going to be feeling a real tendency to have this kind of snapping back right now with Venus in Aries, which it's been there for a couple weeks, and particularly because Mars is also there. Realizing where you've compromised too much around certain principles, even if it's not that you've held the other person accountable, or you've held you've held it against the other person. Maybe you haven't, and maybe you're not experiencing it that way. Maybe there's not fighting or whatever, but you just realize, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been compromising too much of my, comfort or value or stability or something in this situation, and I don't want to do it anymore. I've been doing it because I want to have the connection, but now I don't want to do it anymore, or at least I don't want to do it right now. So again, this snapping back of Venus in Aries, which has been for a few weeks, has been happening as the eclipse. I talked about this a couple weeks ago when I talked about all of this opposite energy. So this is why you've seen a lot of polarizing around your relationships with others in several situations because of that shadow Libra asserting itself. You got to understand the reason you compromise too much is because of the connection you get from it, and not to punish the other person for it, even though it feels so good to jump up on that like soapbox and be that martyr who has been tolerating the other person's blah blah so much. The reason you've been tolerating it is because you haven't wanted to break the connection, and you don't know how to break the connection. And the issue with Libra is not selling your principles down the drain and then snapping back against the other person later because you feel like you deserve it now because of your long time suffering. It's not. It's about being attuned to every little negotiation and every little agreement and every little compromise as it's happening. It's about the scale. You don't put a 10-pound brick on this one and then a 10-pound brick on the other one. A 10-pound brick over time, or let's say 10,000 pebbles over time, which makes the thing go like this, and then put a 10-pound brick on it to balance it. That's kind of the example of letting all these little things build up and build up and build up so that the scale gets tilted, in your mind at least, this way, and then compromising it by dropping a brick on the other one, like, it's not how it works. You need to be negotiating this all the time. Every relationship, every situation is a series of agreements and boundaries, and that's what makes any relationship work. So you're doing no one a favor by compromising on things that you're going to later regret. So that's big. The other thing that just happened is Mercury moved into its sign of debilitation, where it's now opposite the sign of Virgo, like I said, and it's that kind of shadow Virgo thing happening too. So the lunar eclipse that's going to happen on April 3rd will have its ruler Mercury debilitated at the time. So again, picking up those pieces is harder, because those pieces are kind of confusing. They're going to get more confusing, and seeing your part in it and untangling that sort of your part in the scheme of things, which certainly includes the negotiations I've been talking about, like that balancing of the scales. Mercury is really important in that, because it's Mercury and Venus that negotiate relationships. Venus notices how things are maybe a little bit not in alignment, and there's not a mutual respect going, and then Mercury discusses it. Mercury is not aggressive and hostile. He's neutral, and he's flexible, and he listens as well as talks, and all of that stuff. Mercury and Venus are the ones that keep human interactions on track. Mars is not. Mars is destroying something. So this Mercury in Pisces is trying to merge all these details together and be like, don't be so fussy about all that stuff. Just kind of let it all work. So again, it could be one of those things where, on another level, when it comes to actually doing the detailed work of picking up the pieces, there could be some confusion around what the pieces are, what the pieces were that you need to account for, what others need to account for, in whatever it is that the eclipse is disrupting right now. So this is a general kind of overview of what we're sort of looking at right now here on March 30th. A lot of things going on, and very interesting times, and a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities for growth and seeing our responses to things. We're getting triggered in a lot of ways that are very important to us. But one thing to also realize is that in the next several weeks we're going to have, and in fact even like within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a lot of planets in very good dignity. That includes Venus will be in Taurus, Mars in Aries, Sun in Aries. Again, a lot of Aries energy coming up, which, Venus rules Taurus, Mars rules Aries, and the Sun is exalted in Aries. So we're going to have a lot of that kind of exalted, powerful energy. Jupiter will be moving direct, where he's in a sign of exaltation, at least in Cancer. So we have a lot of enlightened, inspired energy coming up in the next couple of weeks, because Venus will be in Taurus within the next couple of weeks. And Mars is in Aries that he rules, and then the Sun's going to go into Aries in a couple weeks, and Jupiter turns direct April 8th. So things are going to get more clear, but right now we're still navigating a lot of this confusion. So one of the main things to do is to not be, is to be patient and not be reactive and all that stuff. This is what's problematic, because you wind up destroying things that you probably don't want to destroy when you're triggered. And when you have all these planets in their fall and join malefics and all this stuff. So anyway, have a good week.